So if you've ever used a Roth IRA before and you've wondered to yourself, am I truly using this to its best potential? Then you're going to want to listen into today's episode of the Financial Prof series and find out more about how you can truly maximize your Roth IRA. Hi, I'm John Norberg and welcome to the Financial Prof. Alright, so today we're going to go over 3 major steps on how you can truly maximize your Roth IRA's potential. If you're watching this video, chances are you probably already know what an awesome vehicle the Roth IRA can be when planning for retirement, and even other issues like, say, education savings or even legacy planning, right? We won't get into those in today's video, but suffice it to say that the Roth IRA is a fantastic vehicle for a whole host of reasons. But ultimately, it usually comes down to the Roth IRA can distribute a tax-free lump sum, periodic payments, whatever the case may be, from its principal. In other words, every dollar you put into that Roth IRA, as long as you meet a few basic qualifications like having it established for 5 years at least, then you're going to get tax-free back again along with any growth, free from federal, state, and local tax. Fantastic, right? So, tip number 1, contribute. Obviously, you want to contribute funds to your Roth IRA if you haven't already. Now, many of you watching probably already have some funding in that Roth IRA. Now, there are 2 philosophies that I often come across when I'm asked, okay, well, when is the best time to contribute to a Roth IRA? And the humorous answer, of course, is yesterday, right? Because time is typically on our side. When it comes to the growth of money, those who are patient, those who have been in the markets for longer, are going to more often than not have better returns. It's time in the markets versus timing the markets that is often going to be the longest term predictor of success, right? So you could wait until the end of the year or heck even next tax year to put money into that Roth IRA. And there are reasons for doing so. But the real thing to think about is, okay, are those reasons enough to justify not contributing early in the year, say in January? Or if you haven't already, here we are in April, getting to be just about tax deadline as of this filming. Maybe this is the time to put something in, especially when you consider the fact that the markets are down right now here in April 2025. So if you put $7,000 to work, right? That's the IRS limit that you can put into a Roth IRA this year. That $7,000 is going to potentially grow over time. Now, if we assume a 7% rate of return, then we know that using the rule of 72, we can do a quick back-of-the-napkin math calculation to figure out that that $7,000 is probably going to grow to around $14,000 potentially in about 10 years. So given a decade of growth at a 7% rate of return, that $7,000 again doubles in about 10 years. Okay, so it's better to have started that clock typically earlier rather than later, waiting till like I said, the end of the year or perhaps even into next tax year. Again, there are reasons to think about doing it that way versus starting earlier in the year, but at least earlier in the year you're going to have time on your side. So step 1 is contribute. Okay, step 2, this is convert. So again, if tip 1 is contribute, then step 2 is convert. This is where we're talking about the Roth IRA conversion, which you may have heard of before, but essentially it consists of taking assets from a pre-tax account like your traditional IRA, or let's just say your traditional 401k, thrift savings plan, 403b, and then converting it to a Roth IRA. When it converts from that traditional to that Roth, you'll pay taxes on that conversion, but now it's sitting in that Roth and growing tax-free, and when you do eventually take it out, it will, again, as long as you meet the qualifications, distribute free of state, local, and federal tax. Fantastic, but it's also a way to get money into a Roth IRA if you're over the income limits. So this year, the limit is $161,000. Now, if you make more than that, if your income is more than that, you're typically going to have to do some form of backdoor Roth contribution, which is just a fancy Roth conversion, right? Which for most people means setting up a temporary traditional IRA, contributing money to that, and then immediately converting it into a Roth IRA. And because there are no income limits on being able to put money into a traditional IRA, it's a really neat way for those who are in the upper income brackets to get money into that Roth IRA, regardless of income limits, right? So the other way that conversions come into play is, let's say you have a large traditional or pre-tax balance. in your traditional 401k, traditional IRA, whatever the case may be. If you convert funds from that, you can convert as little or as much as you want to the Roth IRA. So you could convert, let's just say, $100,000 this year. And then as long as you wait, that money will potentially grow over time in that tax-free Roth IRA and distribute tax-free. So let's do a quick calculation. Again, using that same 7% rate of growth, we know that will probably double, potentially, over the course of about 10 years. So that $100,000 now becomes $200,000. And guess what? With markets down right now, this makes an even better time to consider a Roth conversion. Because if the markets are down by, let's just say 10%, then that's 10% less, potentially if you will, that you're paying in taxes for converting the same number of shares that you otherwise would have had you done so earlier in the year when the markets were near their peak, right? So market volatility, down markets, these are great times to consider Roth conversions and contributions, right? Okay, now, step number 3. Step number 1 was contribute, step number 2 was convert, and now step number 3, allocate. Once we've gotten that money into that Roth IRA and it's chugging along, growing nicely for us, we really want to take a close look at what investments it's actually in. There's a strategy out there whereby you allocate your money according to which tax bucket makes the most sense. So let's just say you want a 60-40 portfolio. This is very common for those who are approaching or in retirement and consists typically of about 60% of the portfolio or so in stock-based funds and then 40% or so of the portfolio between cash and bond funds, right? This portfolio will oftentimes have 60-40 in every single bucket. In other words, the traditional IRA, the Roth IRA, the individual account, etc., etc., etc. But one allocation strategy that you might want to consider is putting the most growth-oriented assets into the most tax-advantaged accounts, thereby potentially making those tax-free accounts or most tax-advantaged accounts like the Roth IRA grow more over time than the less tax-advantaged accounts like the traditional or the joint or individual accounts that you might have. So one potential strategy might be, again, looking at the overall portfolio, having 60% in stock funds and 40% in bond and cash funds, but having all stock funds in that Roth IRA so that over time, again, you get as much potential growth out of it as possible because stock funds tend to outpace both bonds and cash over long periods of time. I'll give you a quick example. If you go back to January of 2015, so about 10 years ago, and then fast forward to January of 2025, in that time period, the market grew approximately 202%, looking at the S&P 500, right? So if we had done a Roth conversion back in 2015 and put all of that money into a S&P 500 index fund, we would have, rather than say $200,000 at the end of 10 years, probably closer to $300,000 or even a hair more than that. So this is where all of that allocation I'm talking about comes into play, because that $300,000 would be in a Roth IRA, meaning all of that growth, that entirety, could distribute tax-free in that case, which is a lot more awesome than if you had to pay some form of taxes on it, like you would if you had it in a traditional or a joint or individual account, right? So again, tip number 3 is allocation. So all of this to say, if you have had questions on whether you're truly utilizing your Roth IRA in the best and most efficient way possible, and you'd like to talk to somebody about that, give us a call or drop us a line. We're happy to hear about your situation. And in the meantime, we'll see you out there.